afternoon and blessings. You know, I'm always thanking God for the opportunity to be with you all to share knowledge, lest we perish for lack of it. We don't want to do that. But I want to thank this young man, Norm, for allowing me the space to be able to present to you. And of course, I thank my crew, Lula, Sheila, and Juanita, and of course, my little ones that kind of keep the promo going, Elijah and Awa. Halim, I'm so sorry. Awa is the brother. He'll be coming up next. But these guys, these little ones, they keep me, they do the promotion for me. So that's all good. But I just want to thank you all for sharing with me, and we got a great show this afternoon. You all know me. I'm Ruby Williams Shiver, the Unapologetic Amateur, looking for experts. I'm always looking for experts, and they're coming, believe me. Once we know exactly what I mean by that, I mean experts in Africanism, knowing all that stuff that's going to get us back to who we were and where we need to be. But you know what? This is the third consecutive day of total bliss for me, like being part of a revolution of sort, a resurgence of our reclaiming ourselves and not being afraid to declare it, which I'm sure, as African people, is going to take us to the next level. Now, beginning like last Saturday, when I say there's a 3-day type of thing that was going on with me, I was at an affair with my little ones, the kids that we Zoomed in last week from our new academy, named the William Acubalon Cultural Academy of Plainfield, that is called Williams ACAP. And they are also a group of talented musicians. They performed at a scholarship brunch on Saturday, put on by Rose's studio, my baby sister. She teaches music, piano, and voice. Been doing it for now over 30 years, and the speaker she had was phenomenal. The Reverend Britt of Mount Teman AME Church of Elizabeth, whom I'm going to have on this podcast soon. He was teaching Africanism. So keep a watch out for him. And, of course, the youngsters I had on last week are Rose's studio students. And did they perform? These youngsters are an extension of our efforts here at the podcast to educate our children totally about themselves in all aspects of, and all facets of their being. And, of course, I must give credit, believe it or not, to Governor DeSantis, because when he decided to take our history out of the school system, well, that just motivated me, as I pray it will do others to jump to it and provide outlets by which our children will learn their history, even before they leave the nest. They will have been told and studied their great ancestral past, lest they fall for the garbage that they don't have a history. Now, we are also getting the students ready for a pre-Kwanzaa program for December 19. So put that on your calendar, okay? See, we just want to keep them engaged with their culture. Then on Sunday, yesterday, my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Dante Quick, who had just shortly returned from Africa, Ghana that is, he spoke about us as African people and all that entails. I learned something from him every Sunday. He's a great man of God who knows who we are and not afraid to claim it. And, of course, today I'm looking forward to sharing this space with my co-host for the month, Darrell Bates. Darrell has been here before as a guest, but he has so much knowledge, information on Africa, that I knew I just had to have him as my co-host. Welcome, Darrell. And
Thank you.
You're so welcome. And we have a great guest today, Darrell. You know, I talked to you all about the time, about needing something to recapture that which has been taken from us. And I proffer that one would have to know that there were something taken from us that needed to be recaptured. Not only to know that, There were some things taken from us, but that it is necessary to study, diagnose, and develop cures for what ails us. Well, y'all know me. I believe one of the ways to do that is one has to become an expert in the area of what I call Africanism. One of the studies that would be involved in this curriculum would be the study of what all this has done to us. Well, this brother I have on today brings that realization with him. Joseph Graham Jr. Now, I'm not sure if our guest is on. Did he get on, Norm? Okay. Mr.
Yes,
Graham,
ma'am.
are you there? Okay, my brother. Mr. Graham is a faith and mental health coach and a minister. You know, the church has always been the source to our survival. You know, I was on a show some time ago where the interviewer, who was faith-based, asked me, when did I get converted? Now, I told her, when you grow up in a segregated South, which I did, you don't have a conversion, you have a continuum. Early on, you get a connection with God, and you don't let go. Keep him forever close to the vest. Brother Graham or Minister Graham, I'm going to read some of your bio and bring you in on the conversation. Let me just read a little bit because I'm going to have you tell me some more about yourself. It's just that I didn't get a chance to get your bio off my computer in time. Joseph Graham Jr. is a faith and mental health minister, leading or mental health ministry leader, and also a member of the Consortium of Educators and Mental Health Professionals of New Jersey. He is the founder of Road to Damascus Campus Outreach and the senior pastor of Road to Damascus Christian Church. He's an author, too. His book, Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health. Welcome, my dear brother. I'm so excited to have you on because they know that's what I preach every day about. We're going to have to regain that which was stripped from us. And one of the ways I say that, we're going to have to understand our mental needs as well as our physical needs, particularly since we have gone through so much from our way to our homeland of Africa to where we are today. What has happened to us, what has changed us, what have brought what I call I've written 5 books already, but my 6th one's supposed to be damaged goods made in America. No doubt about it that when you've gone through what we went through, it's no shame to say you've been damaged in some respect. And we need folks like yourself who understand that there's a need for us to recapture that which has been stripped away from us. So I'm so glad to have you on today, and I'll say welcome and welcome. Unmute yourself, I think.
Yes, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate being in this space. I count it an honor to be with you today.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. Now, the first question I want to ask of you is, just explain, I read some parts of your book, and just let me just show you, just the public to see this. But in the meantime, the name of your book, where do you get Light Up? What does that mean?
Okay, the book is called Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health.
Okay.
And the book was born out of my own experience of being a leader, being someone that had helped many people through very trying times to find their own social and emotional healing. But I myself had never gone to counseling for myself.
Okay.
And when the death of my mother, who I was very close with, who was given 3 months to live once she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, my father, who passed a year later, and a divorce that would take place 2 years prior. And by this time, I'm very unhealthy. And my doctors were like, if you want to live to see walk your girls down the aisle, you're gonna have to do something different. And
Okay.
it challenged me to go inward, to really go and do some soul searching, and found myself at the intersection of faith and mental health, and really and finding life. And the things that I learned, or the inspirational life keys I discovered, are in that book. And it's a
Okay.
guide to help people with walk back to wellness.
Okay. So where can we pick the book up from? Because I just read a little bit online, and that's what I'm trying to find. Just to okay, let me just read just a passage from your book, and I just was floored by this. You said a few years ago, I defied the culture and traditional norms associated with mental illness in the black church and did the unthinkable. I chose to get help for my mental issues from a mental health counselor. It was not an easy decision because, like many in the church, I thought it would signal a weakness in my faith. However, that decision has proven to be one of the most life transforming choices I have ever made. As African Americans in general, we do not seek mental health counseling, and African American men in particular consider the very idea of seeking therapy as weak. Now that's profound because that is basically what I tried to preach about. I don't preach, but I'm trying to talk about often, is how we're going to need to recognize that there has been something we've suffered syndromes, one of which is mental syndrome, where it affected us to the point that I wrote a book, my brother, called Verbal Healing. Because, like you said, we're ashamed of ourselves in many ways, and we haven't been told why where we are, and why we're who we are, and how it got us to where we are. So when we hear ourselves say we are worst enemy, we don't stick together, we are this, just criticizing ourselves and not liking ourselves, it's from that position that somewhere along the line we have been damaged, and we need to be to restructure ourselves by folks like yourself who can come in and define for us what is ailing us. And as a result of that, give us some solution. See, that's what, when I call myself an unapologetic amateur looking for experts, I try to explain the expert I'm talking about in terms of us as African people, how to restore some of what has been stripped away from us. So having said that, how did you what would you had said that your first thing was your first start was for yourself? What would you suggest though to us as African people how we can get more involved with learning about the need for our mental health?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is to be honest with ourselves. And so the reality is, I always tell people that our blind spots are not created by what we don't know and don't see.
Okay.
Our blind spots is created by us being overconfident in that which we know. And because there's areas of our life that where we know certain things, or we've even deemed, I'll say, experts in certain things, we use that as an excuse not to find your areas of growth and the places where you have gaps of understanding and making that decision to grow. And we as a people are so plagued with low self-esteem that we oftentimes confuse constructive criticism with verbal abuse.
Right.
There was a time when we could sit and debate and go at each other where iron sharpeneth iron, going back and forth over different viewpoints. Look at Malcolm and look at Martin, who had very different opposing ideologies on one end, but they both ended up in the same place talking about human rights.
Right.
But that happened from a healthy exchange of pushing one another. We now in a stage where we no longer, there's been such a community breakdown that we no longer have ears to our own community members to allow them to say, listen, brother, sister, that area right there, you good over here, but over there, you need some work and you need to find some help.
But you just said it. Now, isn't that going to take some kind of expertise somewhere other than what I would know? I may be able to criticize my brother and sister, and that's what I don't do that because I know not to do that. But I don't
Yes.
know the solution to where I should come in to ask for help, that I will not find myself in that position of criticizing. Because I said, one of the things that I want all of us to understand is that the two words that I often talk about is excuse and explanation. Now, excuse is when you're born into white privilege, out of white privilege.
Hmm.
Explanation is when you're born from the slave mentality. So if we, ours is never an excuse for anything. We just
Hmm.
have explanation for why we do what we do. But it's going to take our experts, folks like you who have studied what has happened to us over the 200 years, particularly that we call slavery. And I defy that because I want to call it another name,
I got you.
genocide or whatever.
Yes.
But the 200 years that we experienced something unlike anyone else in the annals of history, in the history of the world, then we need some specific on how to recognize it, then how to get through it, and how to find cures for it. And what
Yes.
you're doing now is very much about that. We're going to have to, more than just knowing what happened to us, knowing our history, which is good. We got to know our history. But once we know it, we got to know what to do about what has happened to us. And you sound like you on the road to Damascus, on
Amen.
the road to know. So just give
Yeah.
us some more information about what you suggest that we do as African people to get back to
Yes.
where we need to be.
So one thing that was amazing about the 90s, I had the pleasure in my younger years of spending some quality time with Dr. John Henry Clark,
Oh my word.
Dr. Ben, with Kwame Ture,
Yes.
um, Dr. Marimba Ani, and a number of people. A number of folks. And so the first thing is what a lot of us, or in this space, we have the historical context of what happened to
Yes.
us. The next phase is the social and emotional therapy,
Yes.
the mental health counseling, where you begin to deal with how did this macro situation affect you in your micro world.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that takes place when you're with a mental health counselor or a clinical therapist, helps you to walk through how has that impacted, because we learn through science
Mm-hmm.
that trauma is in our DNA,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how it manifests in us. Those are the types of things that are unpackaged when you're with a counseling professional, as well as like myself, of faith and mental health coach. Because see, a counselor helps you to deal with the diagnosis of what you have, but
Mm-hmm.
coaching provides how you walk in the healing
Right.
and build toward resolution of what you're dealing with. So historical context, counseling to unpackage it and look at how it has impacted you, and
Mm-hmm.
coaching. Well, how do you walk in your healing moving forward?
Right. Right. Excellent. And we got to get to definitions of what it is that was created around the treatments that we had over
Yes,
those 200 years. You know,
yes,
the book, I'm sure you read this book by the sister, Dr. DeGrew, Post-Slavery,
yes,
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndromes.
yes.
Once we
Post-traumatic slave
understand that we
syndrome.
have syndromes that were created out of the years that we was enslaved,
Yes,
then we can maybe find ways to deal with them, not just normally, but someone with expertise in how to create places around where we can go or find out how to deal with them and the cure for them. I
yes,
use my podcast to make a reference to how I define myself, the unapologetic amateur versus the expert. And I use the virus that came through here
yes,
as an example. Matter of fact, my last book, Why Should I Not Cry? Ode to the Black Man, came out right around the time that this virus hit us. And I think God has put it in my head to this is Ruby. This is how you should explain yourself. Otherwise, you keep confusing people with this expert amateur concept. So I used the virus. I said it myself when that came about, killed over 2 million people throughout the world. So it was sad. None of us had experienced that. And I understand that virus had not hit like that for the last 100 years or so. But one of the things we knew right away, we weren't going out looking for sports figures. We weren't going out looking for entertainers. We weren't going around looking for even intellectuals. We knew we needed someone specific that knew the virus. Epidemiologists or the virologists, whoever has studied that specifically. Well, when we look at ourselves, and I coined what we went through for the 400 years, the African slave virus 401. So I'm saying it's a virus. So it's the same way we need professionals. We need experts. We need those who have studied, like yourself, the whole thing around what it had done to us mentally, how it has affected our mind. Then come through with reasons that we need to be dealt with like that. Many of us don't see it that way. We don't think we have a problem. But we are great people, but we're not infallible. So we did go through something over those 200 years, plus the additional two of racism and desegregation and stuff. So we got to get people here together that will create this curriculum of sort to determine how we can address. The same as that virologist, that epidemiologist, they had a certain group of people. Because I went to my doctor in the process of this stuff, and he said to me, I'm not the expert. Now, he's an expert in what he's an expert in, but he wasn't an expert in trying to deal with the virus. We got a virus in our people, the African Americans, who came over, who was snatched from our homeland, brought over here through the Middle Passage, all that stuff that went down, and hoisted on slave blocks. And after that, treated unlike any other human being in the history of this world. Yeah. So we got to get to the point where we understand that clearly and know how to deal with it. And having brought you on, because I'm going to continue to bring folks like you on, so we can continue to talk about it from the perspective of our mental health as well as our physical health. Now, how I was going to ask you a question, how trauma affects our mental and physical health and our social and emotional well-being.
So how it affects our mental health is when you're dealing with a people who have such a degree of dehumanization, there's levels to that type of low self-esteem. It manifests itself in different ways. For example, the commonplace of low self-esteem is when a person doesn't believe in themselves. Like that's like the most common form. But what I have observed is we've got folks who are CEOs, directors of companies, vice presidents, doctors, lawyers in high positions. But we will do each other dirty because sometimes out of the level of self-hatred that came through slavery, whether we're talking about colorism, whether we're talking about us treating each other different because of socioeconomic status, there's so many layers to it. And what we'll do is that is a larger expression of a low self-esteem issue, because if you don't think much of yourself, then the lives of those who look like you and continue to remind you who you are, and you've been taught to hate that person, then there's a level of attack and disrespect. And you combine that with the breakdown of the communal support systems that we've had, and you find us diving so deep into assimilation in this country that we have allowed ourselves to no longer treat our communities as communities. It becomes easy because now it goes from grandmama and the woman down the street who watches the kids on the block to This is my child and mind your business.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of how that low self-esteem issue with a person infects a whole community and causes the community not to be able to properly protect and support itself.
Great, great. Now, Daryl, you've been listening to us, and I've been doing all. You can come in and ask a question. What you like to ask the good
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening,
doctor?
Brother Joseph.
Good evening, good sir.
How are you?
Rocking and rolling.
Sounds good. I love everything that you're saying. One question that I did have
Yes.
was, as you stated, in the Black community, getting mental health help is not something that traditionally that we've sought after, especially in the Black church.
Yes.
So when I was reading your information earlier, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you suggest that people from the Black church or in the church seek out mental health professionals that are also believers? And the reason that I asked the question is because I've had some people stop therapy because of the lack of faith or the lack of God in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because like there was no, like, of course, in the Black church, we're usually told, pray about it. You know, ain't worry about it, pray about it. It'll be all right. That's what we were always told.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if we're told to go to therapy, it's like some people feel in therapy, there's no God in the conversation. So would you suggest that someone seek therapy from someone who is also a believer?
First of all, that's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked. So there's a part of my book somewhere in the introduction where I talk about how when we have problems with our eyes and we need to go to an eye doctor.
Yeah.
When we have problems in our mouth, we go to a dentist. And because they have the skills to deal with what ails the situation. And see, what I'm saying is I'm telling people that people who are mental health therapists, clinical therapists, and counselors are trained with how the mind works and how it affects your emotions and your choices and decisions. Now, to put it plainly to you, there are some folks who, unless that person is a Christian, then they won't have a level of confidence. I'm sensitive enough to know that that's a reality. And I have my own team of what I call faith and mental health professionals to help out folks that are in that rigid space. But the reality, because there's two things you're battling. One is helping people to see that this is where religion becomes a hindrance because people use it to dodge their trauma. In my book, I talk about two main components that cause this. One is called denial. The other one's called deflection. Denial is, oh, Jesus took care of it all. God took care of all of that. That's a way for a person to not to have to address their problems. And in the mental health, any good mental health counselor, whether they're a believer or not, is going to help you get past or identify the fact that you're dodging the issue using faith as a reason. The other one is deflection, where you say, Jesus done took care of it all. No. That's just your way of not having to come to the conclusion that you need to have a problem and it needs to have a solution to it. And so for me, I would say as long as you're dealing with a skilled therapist, just like a skilled dentist or skilled eye doctor, but not everybody. But I'm smart enough to know that some people wouldn't be able to receive, because the whole point is them getting help. And if they won't hear that person, that expert, unless they are a person of faith, then ain't nothing to get somebody of faith to help them to get to that space. Because what's different about that in dentistry and other things is that you're dealing with a person's thought pattern. When you're dealing with a person's dentist and eye stuff, not so much. But when you're dealing with mental health and social and emotional stuff, what people believe is attached to that. And if a person not being a believer is going to hinder that development, then we have enough faith walking folks that will have the skill set to help them out.
And the reason that I asked is because I had spoken to a therapist one time, and they told me, "Well, you need to lay that faith thing to the side and deal with different things in a different way." And my response was, "Well, I don't know how to do that. Like, I can't lay my faith to the side and deal with it." So they were this particular therapist, and and I'm saying I've heard this experience in the Black community.
Yes.
Where the therapist doesn't infuse faith. Because all those things that you said, Jesus took care of it all. It's true. Like, because we can't say that he didn't, because he did. So, and even in the understanding, so what I liked about what you represent, or what you put forth, is the fact that the faith part is also a part of the mental health, and infusing the two, because I think it's important, especially in the Black community, that we're allowed to, even because a lot of times, and I'll say this, and some folk may not agree, but Christian folk are probably some of the most ignorant folk that there is.
Yeah.
Because on the norm, Christians don't study like others study. So we tend to go to church and we hear little bits or old grandma sayings that are not even Bible reference, and we live off of these things that God never even said that.
Right.
But we're living our life off of it. So I like the way you talk about infusing the two, so that having an understanding, if I'm believing something, that I can at least be shown, even biblically, well, that's not what the word says.
Exactly.
So your belief system can have you defeated if you don't understand, because I often tell people that you watch these movies, right? People watch horror movies or vampire movies or Exorcists. And oftentimes you see evil and good battling, and oftentimes evil wins. And, it's like, the devil's beating up the person of God.
Yeah.
So people get in our community, they get caught on this defeated God. So if you don't understand who God is, then, and you're depending on a defeated God, then you yourself are going to be defeated. So I think it's very important that, like I said, I read the stuff you've written, and I like the fact that if that's something that they need to understand, that is there.
And what I'm hearing really is that I'm a Christian also, so I can stand on that. But I know from a very young child, I felt that God came to me, and you don't have to be this of this, what we call religion. Your faith is what keeps you. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you can be a whatever. If your faith is in a God, because I often thought about that, my brother, in terms of our African past. I'm always trying to think back to our original self. Our original self did not classify any of the names we know now, Christian, Muslim, or whatever, And I know my folk didn't go to hell. I know I'm going to meet them up there one day, my ancestors. So that's another thing through what we're going through. Like I say, the syndromes that we have developed over those 400 years is part of that too. We get caught up into a definition, which some of you are going to help us come out of it. And I think you're doing that in terms of how you define it.
Yes.
You don't have to have that particular faith, but you need. The need and have to is two different things, you know. Uh, so I'm gonna let you finish on that one because you're the professional, you're the
Well, I wanted to
expert.
speak to what you said. So, in my book,
Mm-hmm.
when I say this, I identified 30 inspirational life keys to overcoming 30 very specific mental health challenges. When I searched myself, I had 30 mental health challenges. Here's some of them: depression, anxiety, loneliness, lack of motivation. My book, I grew up on a small book called The Daily Bread.
Mm-hmm.
And my book, the way my book breaks down, on the top, it'll say like what I call an inspirational life key. For example, one is your feet can only travel to places your vision has already been.
Mm.
That's just an example, like a wisdom nugget.
Right.
Then under that, it tells you exactly what the struggle is, the mental health challenges, or what you're trying to overcome. It could be depression, anxiety. Then under that is what I have, is when I go into the message. And in that message, I'm breaking down how to overcome, like the details of what that wisdom nugget was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Then under that is a scripture that helps go along with the message. And then the last part is called Journey Within. It actually gives the people next steps of what to do. And it has journal pages for them to write down. So in other words, not only does it bring information, understanding, and there's a glossary in the back of the book that gives the clinical definition. Because let's be clear, I partnered with a licensed mental health counselor who's a believer to write the book. So the definitions in the book have clinical definitions written in a way that the average person can understand. And then I give them next steps on what to do. So every time they go through it, they now can hold themselves accountable or give them steps of what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just to a point, when we talk about with Africa, it's often misunderstood in that the belief is that the white man or whomever brought God to Africa, which is not true.
Not by a long shot.
If you look in the Word of God, you don't find Europe until the New Testament.
Yeah.
Europe is not mentioned anywhere in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So even geographically, where you see God doing what he's doing, it's not being done in Paul set out to give the gospel, to the Gentiles, and he went to Rome and different places. But as far as the gospel is concerned, people think that for whatever reason that we were worshiping totem poles, but that's not true.
Yeah.
We were worshiping the true and living God. Now, what is different is names. What's different is types of worship. But if you do research on the gods, or God in Africa, you'll find the true and living God.
Yeah.
You won't. Of course, there are other religions, I guess, so to speak, in Africa, like there are anywhere else. But a lot of people think because the slaves or the slave owners, they came in with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other hand, and they began to give out information concerning the Bible that just wasn't true in order to enslave the people.
Yeah.
That's where that comes in that. But prior to that, people think that somehow the Africans were godless.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we were given religion, and we should be thankful for religion. In Ghana, there's at the slave dungeon, there's a church on the top of the dungeon.
Yeah.
Where they worshipped or whatever, they had church, I'll say, on top of the dungeon. They just justified it by twisting up the scriptures.
Exactly.
But they made it seem as if, we didn't have, and then even today, we as the people kind of start to believe that we didn't know God
Well,
Yeah.
until,
there's a
and
lot of
that's why they
things.
begin to call it like the white man's religion
Right,
when it's
right.
not.
See, those are the things that our brother and people like him are going to have to unravel for us, bring it
Yeah.
back into perspective to know that much of what we have learned, and a lot of what we have learned, and put it that way, when you're stripped of everything, you can understand why you come up figuring out a lot of other stuff. Now, I'm going to
Yes.
ask you about your wellness ambassador program. Tell us about that.
So with the wellness or ambassador program, um, I designate a group of people. Sometimes it can be um, people who are caregivers,
Hmm.
because caregivers often don't take care of themselves,
Right.
and that's a whole nother thing. Sometimes it's groups of parents, but it's a particular, usually a designated group of folks, and um, it's called wellness because in the program, which is about 9 months in its totality,
Hmm.
we're dealing with the social and emotional well-being, the physical health, and the financial health of that person. All
Okay.
three are dealt with in the wellness, and I have experts in these
Hmm.
various different areas. So my partnerships are not only with mental health professionals, but I have doctors and nurses as well as financiers and people who understand economics and
Okay.
financial literacy, so
Hmm.
that whatever level people are at personally, they're able to align their entire health, because it is a deception
Hmm.
that these things are even separate.
Yeah, yeah. And I see where you say supporters need. I'm just reading part of your thing.
Yes, yes,
Supporters need support too. Explain
yes,
that
yes,
to us.
yes. That's for my people who are, some of them, they're the mental health count, the people that's always helping folks.
Hmm.
So I have a program just for them. I said, in this space, I need you to cast your crowns to the floor, and I need you to be somebody that's being helped and supported, like all the help and support that you've been giving out.
Hmm.
You
I
got to,
think it's,
because oftentimes, let me tell you, research shows that oftentimes caregivers, because everybody's focused on the designated sick person, they expire before the people they were taking care of.
Yeah.
That's personal to me. My mom was a home health aide.
Mm.
My dad had a stroke. He was one of the first black bus drivers in the state of New Jersey,
Okay.
and drove all those years, got retired, had a stroke, lost the activity of his left arm. My mom was taking care of him, and doing what she does. And next thing we know, she has a pain, goes to the hospital. They give her 3 months to live. So the
Hmm.
very thing I grew up watching her do, us and the family had to be home health aides for her, and
Hmm.
she ends up passing. And my dad passes a year later. But that's just that's the personal part of that story
Right.
of why I think about Dorcas in the Bible, who was
Hmm.
the community leader who dies in the middle of the room while everybody's there. When
Yeah.
you're a leader, people don't know what pain looks like on you, even when you tell them you're sick. So that's what
Mm.
that program is about.
About okay.
and it's
And
just,
I'm sorry.
I'm
Go on, Daryl.
I'm sorry. I love the financial. I love all of it, but I love the financial literacy part
Yes.
because we as a community, um, coming up, it's not like we're educated in financial literacy, whereas a lot of our counterparts, that was something that was discussed at the dinner table, credit cards, um, you know, um, any type of financial business was discussed. They would hear people talking about it within their family. We didn't
Yes.
necessarily have that. I
Yes.
know when I went to college, credit card companies came to campus and they were giving out credit cards. And I was like, credit cards? Sure. I took them and went and spin them up,
Oh.
used them up. And then bills started coming in.
Oh.
What? Like,
Hmm.
I didn't have the whole concept of credit cards. So, and then it was the thing of, don't even worry about it. What difference does it make? Didn't have the knowledge of credit score, didn't
Hmm.
have the knowledge of how it could affect life,
Yes.
Yeah.
later on. So, like, whenever I hear financial literacy in the Black community, and no matter what age,
Yes.
because it's not something, because especially like with young people and with older people are very tight, when it comes down to their finances. Like they don't want to discuss that. And oftentimes people die, and then it's like everything's a mess because
Yes.
no one was discussing this. No one had the discussion about um, wills. No one had
Yes.
all of that. Right now, I'm stuck in a situation where I had a relative die, had no will, no nothing. So those type of things I think is just so important. And I commend you tremendously for doing that.
Well,
Oh,
that's the point
absolutely.
I'm trying to make. We need our experts to come in on those things. There's a whole lot of things in our community that need to be unraveled. And I think until we understand that, we're going to begin to continue to look at other folks who may be doing the very thing that we are saying we're not doing and think it's our fault. But it's not. And when we have our professionals come in and explain the different syndrome that we have suffered from the jump, talk about that first, then we won't criticize ourselves in a way to find the blame placed on us. And that's not to make excuses, that's explanation again.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I concern myself so much with today is our young people. Our
Yes.
young ones are in so much turmoil now. You'd find our young people are committing more suicide than they ever before. But see, there are things that's happening in our community we are not, when I say we're not talking about, because we don't know. That's one of the reasons I continue to talk about the expert. We need people who will get together on issues around why we are in the position that we're in. So many of our young people are going through some real terrible times these days. When I was coming through, I knew the difference between right and wrong generally. But there's so much out there now that confronting our young people that it's a difficult thing to even kind of decide the right and the wrongness of stuff.
Yes.
Again, we need our folks to come in and understand where that all that is coming from. And when I say when I was coming through, we knew right and wrong. That's not to dismiss the whole wrongness of what we went through. It just that
Yeah.
outside of that, we knew the basics of right and wrong, and we lived by that. But there's so much stuff going on today in our society that our young people are committing more suicide. We got to talk about their mental health and make them realize that it's okay to be vulnerable. That is just what it is. How do you uh, deal with that, my brother?
So when I have my sociology hat on
Mm-hmm.
and research hat, research shows that Black youth is the fastest growing demographic battling with suicide in the nation.
Mm.
And even right here where I am in North Carolina, Mecklenburg County, which is where Charlotte is, has the biggest issue of suicide amongst a certain age gap in the state. And so in September, I partnered with a phenomenal organization called Living Waters, Inc.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the 2023 Black Youth Wellness Summit. And at that summit, we had a well-known radio personality to kind of host the event.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a panelist of stakeholders, community stakeholders. We had mental health counselors, the youngest African American female judge, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff Department, who's a brother, talking about how to avoid the traps of the criminal justice system and not end up in there. We had a representative from the school system, and we had a young student, high school student who's a leader in the community, and a young man who's removed from high school, but he's a young, successful entrepreneur. And the young people were able to speak their mind as well as ask questions to the panelists. And then what followed the summit is we had what's called wellness stations,
Okay.
where people were able to go and do yoga therapy, African drum therapy, African dance therapy, art therapy. Because one thing to say you need healing, you need this, but no. We had a station so they could go and experience it.
Okay.
And so, one of the things that I was saying when I was kind of on the run of going to different interviews, preparing for the conference, and I say this now, is that the skeletons in the closets of our parents become the imaginary friends that our children play with.
Okay.
And a lot of times we look at our
Explain that.
what's going on with them, and I say they're dealing with the residue of the unaddressed issues
Yes.
of their parents and the generations before them. And it is important. Transparency is important for our young people because think about it. It becomes easy to feast on whatever the world is giving them, because children know things they don't always know how to articulate. They can tell when someone's not being 100% honest. But this music is coming to me like it's raw and real. So when it comes to choosing talking to you, who acting like you just showed up as this holier than thou adult who got it all right and not telling me what you really went through, which make me feel like as a child, like I'm just something wrong with me because you always been perfect.
Yes.
But then I got all of this crazy behavior and crazy transparency coming from the music, then I'm gonna gravitate to that. What makes it easier for them to reject that is if you get real with me and tell me your pitfalls and how you got there. Now I can hear you because now you're less of this foreign alien entity, but now I can see you as human and as somebody that I can trust. And that's what's missing in our community. They need to hear the transparency. And here's the thing, I was saying this at a meeting this past weekend. There are certain things we as a people did because they were coping mechanisms. And a lot of us haven't realized that when the need for the coping mechanism expired, we didn't know to change behavior. For example, the history behind why the average Black woman, when she's got children going in the store, don't you touch nothing. You bet not act like you need anything. Don't be looking hungry. There's history to that. Because if a child brought attention to himself on that plantation or during the times of slave auctions, even if they were not even slated to be sold that day, they could be snatched immediately. And that level of trauma is in the DNA of our people. But even though we're far removed from the situation, we're still acting out. And we got to know the difference between some of our traditions were born in coping mechanisms that we need to let go because now we're dismantling ourselves. That whole thing about the money and keeping your money hidden because of how, think about it, Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, they blew up Black Wall Street. Every time we had something, it was taken from us. So this thing of keep it to yourself and keep it to trauma, brother.
That's the kind of thing we got to know. You may know it. Someone else may know it. But Ruby, the amateur, may not know it. So I'm saying if I'm an unapologetic amateur, I need my experts out there defending us in a way that will be legitimate and not as an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's just an explanation. Now, I got to recognize some of my folks here. I see Sheila Brown is watching, Rose Cabbage Dog watching, say, worthwhile listening to you, my brother. And Lloyd Sharvis, third, is watching. Oh, I got some people here, you just keep rolling it up because those are the ones I see. But I am just so pleased. I knew that we're going to have folks like you on that we could give a perspective of where we are as African people without the excuses, because I don't use the word excuse. It's not an excuse coming from us. It's an explanation, just what you enumerated there. So go on and talk. I'm enjoying that.
Yes, indeed. So when we begin to sit down with our young people and walk through the history, one of the things I was blessed to be a part of is my dad's side of the family was one of the few Black folks to maintain 99 acres of land in southern Georgia. And there's a whole history and stories of how they tried to take the land, and even to this day, have us having to follow the leadership of my aunts and uncles, and as they're detailing what they've gone through so that they can properly pass the baton to us. And every year we have a family reunion on the land. We rehearse the history every single year. We as family members have to pay dues every single year. We bring our family. They are part of it. And it's a whole tradition. We have to get, and if there's families listening to us and they're like, our family don't do this and our family don't do that. If you're hearing this, then it needs to start with you.
Yes, very much so. Let me just recognize Wakia. Thank you for listening, baby. See, Lynn Walker, Walla. Thank you all. Roll it up there. Some other ones that I can't read now. But I'm just so pleased with the conversation today. We're going to have you on again, brother. And cause we need that. We need to understand where we came from, how we got there, what we need to get past all the stuff that's been done to us. I made an example a couple of weeks ago of my Lamborghini, imaginary Lamborghini, and how it had been stripped from. We had those. It was stripped. Everything stripped out of the Lamborghini. Everything. Then broke the glasses, and the element came in. The weather. You know, that represent us. We were stripped of everything, our heritage, our culture, our language, everything. And after that, then we was abused. And after that, we still was discriminated against. So we need to get together on how to figure out how all that come together to make the people we are today. That way we won't go out blaming ourselves for not having this, not having that, not having the other. As you said, we did right out of slavery have much of what we don't have now. We had the Rosewood. We had all those places that they took from us, which is necessary for us to get back to understanding all that. At least we won't hate ourselves. See, we got a lot of syndrome going on that way. The hate thyself syndrome.
Exactly.
All that kind of stuff that needs to be attended to. I got to do this. My producer is saying, you better read this. You can enjoy this program by listening to BKS1 Radio or seeing me in person on Facebook or YouTube. And you can bless this program by sending a donation. Cash App, $ Ruby Shivers, and Zelle, Ruby Shivers 158 at gmail.com. Don't forget us, and Amber Washington. So glad that you tuning in. Always. I want you all to come, keep sharing this, because I'm going to be bringing folks like this brother on more often. Matter of fact, I may want him to co-host with me one of these days.
Oh, yeah.
I would be so pleased.
Anything you need. I'd be proud to.
I'm just going to say this. I'm just so pleased. As I said before, this has been a week of just blessings for me. Started from last Saturday, I say, when I went out to the concert. And to now, today, with this brother on, I am just enjoying it. Please tell us where we can get your book from.
Yeah, so if you go to Amazon and you go to Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health. It is on Amazon. My name is Joseph Graham. The licensed professional that did the glossary and the preface for me is Dr. Joanne Frederick. But if you just go to Amazon.com and put up Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health, it'll be there. Also, my website is Joseph Graham Jr., just JR, josephgrahamjr.com is my website. And my ministry is called Road to Damascus, a faith and wellness ministry. And you go to YouTube, PG is short for Pastor Graham, PGTV Network, PGTV Network on YouTube. And you can tune in this Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'll be launching what's called Midweek Motivation. So every Wednesday at 7 p.m., I'll be giving a faith and wellness message.
And I see that you're the senior pastor of Road to Damascus Christian Church, right?
Yes,
yes.
Right. It originally started as on UNC Charlotte as a Bible study, but it was called Power Hour. And for 7 years, the students would say, why don't we meet on Sunday? You need to do church. And it was never my intentions to do that. But after 7 years of that, of saying no, I've said yes and started it. And it is now over 20 years old, the campus outreach, and the church is now over 15. And COVID, like you were talking about earlier, shut a lot of things down.
Right.
But it opened up the new doors when it comes to the online stuff. And so we'll be moving into a another building itself next week. I mean, I'm sorry, next month.
Okay.
Next year, the beginning of next year. But this Wednesday we'll be launching at 7 p.m. at PGTV Network is what we
Okay.
call it on YouTube.
Okay. Well, I'm so pleased to have you. It's the end of our show, but I just was enjoying every minute of it. Got to have you back again. And Darryl, we'll see you next week.
It was a pleasure, brother. I enjoyed myself. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
indeed. Appreciate it so much. Look forward to
Thank
next
you,
week.
Cousin Ruby.
Okay. Thank you, my cousin.